must come up, it goes to a peak and then it comes down when you're acclimatized. So it is all related to the EPO. So how did you feel that where you had extensive 3 or 4 days, would you say was adequate for you to acclimatize?
Well, there are two types of strategy that climbers use in the Himalayas. One is siege-style climbing, which is a series of camps going up the mountain and with fixed ropes between the camps, perhaps if it's steep and difficult. Now that actually is good for acclimatization because you're going up and down, and the secret of acclimatization, for instance for Mount Everest, is you have sorties going up the mountain. So you will say go from Camp 2, which is in the Western Coombe at just over 6,000 meters, and you establish fixed ropes up to Camp 3 halfway up the Lhotse face, which is probably about 2 days' work, each night coming back to 6,000 meters. And then having done that, you go right the way back down to base camp, have a few days rest in base camp, and then come up again. The other form of strategy is alpine-style climbing, which basically means you pack your rucksack at the bottom of a mountain and you keep going till you get to the top. Now, if you're going alpine style, of course, this doesn't allow time for acclimatization. So what you do there is you do a series of training climbs before you go on to your main objective. So you go up, say your main objective is 7,500 meters. You will do a couple of training climbs going up to 6,000 meters and coming back down. And so that by the time you go for your main alpine style push on your main objective, once again, you're acclimatized.
So how often did you feel the effects of AMS over 8,000 meters, you think?
I have never actually had AMS, I don't think. I've never had that very first time in 1960. I don't think I had AMS as such. I was just unacclimatized and feeling weak.
How old were you?
That time I was 26 years of age.
26
But
years.
I was on my first Himalayan expedition, and I think, well, maybe to anticipate a question, I do believe that acclimatization and the ability to acclimatize fairly quickly is residual. In other words, on subsequent expeditions, I mean, for instance, it's ages since I've had a headache in the mountains, and I acclimatise well. So I'm acclimatising well, and I'm also, as far as the other danger goes of, your blood getting too thick, your hematocrit rate getting too
So we'll
high.
have to examine your blood sometime, but that's for some other occasion. What was the diet? Did you have a problem with the diet? Because what did you sort of have? A light breakfast?
Well, at altitude, you never have much of an appetite.
Yes.
Cooking's always a problem. But the kind of diet pattern that I've always used, when we're at altitude, muesli for breakfast. So it's muesli with a bit of milk powder and water. Then during the day, a few grain bars, and then of course masses of tea. In fact, I tend to have hot sweet tea, and for a person, I have not got a sweet tooth. I never have sugar in my tea.
Yes, good.
At sea level, and at altitude you have spoonfuls in.
Yes, good.
And then the evening meal is the main meal at the end of the day, and we have soup, powdered soup. And then either sampa, which is the roast barley flour that the Sherpas use, and you make it into a kind of thick porridge, and you can spice it up with chilies.
So this is the sort of ideal diet, because that's what I eat almost daily for the past 20 years. The next question that I was asking is, as you were the expedition leader, you had to deal with many very experienced climbers. Was there ever a point where you felt that a highly experienced individual was not suitable for the thing and you had to say, no, Joe, you can't go?
You do at times have to do that. I mean, for instance, on the 1975 Everest Southwest Face expedition, it wasn't so much as saying, Joe, you can't go, but I was selecting the summit bid teams, and obviously I didn't select people who I didn't think could make it safely. And so I left them out.
Yeah, just the safety is the key. Yeah.
Well, yes, and you're thinking of their interests
Absolutely.
as well. And one particularly, my deputy leader, Hamish McInnes, a wonderful guy, but he'd been involved in a powder snow avalanche earlier on.
Oh gosh.
And, his lungs had been filled up with snow, and he was still ailing. But it's still, being the determined character he is, he wanted to go to the top. And I felt I had to leave him out. And he was upset, but he accepted, and our friendship
Yeah, well, of course,
survived.
it is always disappointing because
Yeah.
even many people who have tried and they had to come back because just too bad on the day. Now, during your extensive climbing career, you had many successes and failures. I don't call them failures. That is just that it's just too bad. What do you feel about is it common problem in climbing, the failure, as they call it? I don't call it a failure.
Well, if you're ambitious and you're stretching the limits, inevitably you don't succeed the whole time. And I think I'm quite good at, if you like, dealing with failure, provided one feels that one's given one's best, and you finally, the weather's been desperately bad, or the route has been terribly dangerous, or whatever it happens to be. You've taken your decision, and the important thing is to come back alive. And if you come back alive and fit, you can always have another go.
Yeah, because Boardman and Tasker, I think, one lost to very important people. So, do you think what is in your mind? We know what the problems are. How I would deal with it if I had £1 million and have a laboratory ready-made. If Barcroft in 1930s had a laboratory like that, he would have been spending 3 months at a time there. But that is what I'm trying to do, and create a laboratory there. What do you think are the crucial things you would like dealt with? Because I'll never get an opportunity like this to ask a real climber who has led expeditions and so on, what do you think should be dealt with? What's the most important problem?
Well, I think it's really an awareness and an understanding of the effect of altitude. And I think that's we already have. I think quite honestly, we knew plenty about it in a practical level back in the 1950s. Griff Pugh, of course, was the scientist on the 1950s.
Well, but it has advanced enormously. For example, I gave you the example, amygdala in the brain is the sensor for CO2, you see. And that triggers, it is what is called a chemosensor for fear and dangerous situations. And that is the sort of research which is now being done already in animals. And quite a lot of those things. And so I wonder what, apart from what you were doing in 50s, 60s, these papers are just being published, you see.
Well, should we say, I'm a great believer in listening to gut instinct, and presumably one's gut instinct is exactly that little part of the brain setting off alarm bells. And I think if those alarm bells go off, I then question very carefully, should I be here? Should I go on or should I turn back? So that I think once you have that instinctive fear, if you like, saying this is very dangerous, you've then got to analyse it and kind of objectively and say, yeah, it is dangerous and it's not worth going on, and you turn back.
Yeah.
So that's really the key to actually staying alive in the mountains.
Because I did want to find out what are we're just drawing up proposals. I thought it would be useful to know the questions you want answered. So were Sherpas' difficulties more often exhaustion or AMS or underlying health problems? How often did they have problems, the non-resident Sherpas, non-altitude? The question he's asking is, was it exhaustion or AMS or a combination of both that might have led to these adverse events? And how often did you see Sherpas develop non-altitude related health issues while at altitude?
Well, as far as, say going back to Peter Boardman and Joe Tasker, who of course made a bid for the summit of Everest, or at least a bid for crossing the upper part of the Traverse of the Northeast Ridge until they joined the main route in 1982, and they vanished from sight. And in fact, since then, Peter Boardman's body has been found, and he's just lying in the snow as if he'd collapsed or fallen asleep almost, and that was at a height of about 27,500 feet.
What is the optimal time for reaching the acclimatization, do you think? 3 days, 7 days, 4 days?
It depends on the individual, and it's really a matter of an individual being very aware of himself and how he's going. If he's got headaches and he's feeling weak, he then wants to go back down, lose height, rest, and then come back up again when he feels okay.
The point you raised, that now what you felt at age 26 and you feel now, and that you acclimatize quite quickly, do you think that with passing of time, i.e. the body has been trained to get acclimatized, does that help?
I think it's a combination of the two. I mean, it pays to be reasonably fit when you actually start off, but you also hopefully have a bit of an approach march, and that gets you fit and gets you acclimatized as well. But going back to your other question about whether the Sherpas acclimatise better, Sherpas get AMS as well. Plenty of Sherpas have died of AMS.
Have they?
And all the advantage the Sherpas have, I think, is that they have a kind of an average hematocrit rate, am I right in saying about 50-53%? So it's higher than people who are living at sea level. But if they go up too fast, and they go up from the levels that they live at, around about, 4,000, 3,500, 4,000 metres, but they go quickly up to 7,000 metres, they can also get AMS.
What has brought you the greatest satisfaction from this climbing experience?
I just love the whole process of climbing. I love being in the mountains, I love climbing, I love planning expeditions. The friendship of my fellow climbers is very important to me, and also I think becoming to understand the kind of the local people, understand, I've got a lot of very dear Sherpa friends and with whom I've shared, extraordinary experiences.
The question here is, how high do you believe man could adapt to live permanently if he is given adequate heating and living conditions, food, and given enough time for a slow and gradual adaptation?
Well, I'm not an expert, I don't know, but I think one thing I can say is that the longest I've been at altitude was on Everest Southwest Face in 1975, when I ran the expedition from Camp 5, and I was, 10 days at around 8,000 metres. Now, there's no doubt about it, if you're for 10 days at 8,000 metres without supplementary oxygen, you are going to be very, very weak indeed, and you could die. I had supplementary oxygen, I slept on oxygen during the night, and I was climbing during the day using oxygen. And but I think at the end of those 10 days, I was quite debilitated, there's no doubt about that.
Yes. One of the things which is quite controversial at the moment, as the scientists sometimes don't agree, the question is based on the research and conclusions reached by Professor Gustavo Zubieta Castillo, the living conditions where he states in scientific journals since several years ago that man can actually adapt very gradually and live at the hypoxic levels of the summit of Mount Everest, just these Nepalis did. If he has adequate housing, heating, food, and of course an excellent condition of health. Do you think you have anything to say about that?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't had any direct experience of it really, so no, I don't think I can really make any kind of.
So finally, it is a great honor to have you address these words to our third chronic hypoxia symposium. We'll be sending you information of the new high altitude museum that opens in La Paz next October 20th. If you have possibilities, you could possibly join. We'll send you a link. It is at no cost to us. It is the Cisco who have donated this money. We would very much appreciate a nice photo from you above, and importance to put in our museum at the peak, if you like, so that our visitors can appreciate your outstanding life of mountain climbing achievements. I thank you very much. I'll come and be with you for a second so that a record is there, that what is the voice behind this camera.
Wonderful, great. Well, while you come to join me, could I just wish everyone at this conference, a very, very successful, interesting and happy conference.
I should very much like to acknowledge my debt to the University of Cambridge Computer Service